was terrific fall on that front. The Ryder Cup obviously wasn't the result we wanted, but in terms of reaffirming it as one of the biggest events on the planet, that clearly happened. We've, as well advertised, signed, a very, we think, very attractive deals with both ESPN and CBS. Really excited about the championship move to May and having the same broadcast team that does the Masters roll into our May event. And we feel like economically as well as strategically, that's a great position to be in. We also had a couple of great new signups on partnerships with Cadillac, and recently, and so everything, and AIG, excuse me, on our insurance carrier. So things are safe there, and we've got a huge dividend from that success, which we now need to figure out how to pass on back to the members in some form, both direct and indirect. And then, of course, being stewards of the game would be the third pillar I'd talk about, and making sure we take care of it, but also evolve it towards where, sort of, as Gretzky used to say, don't go where the puck is, but where it's going to be. And I think we need to be thinking that way about the game. And then the last pillar I'd talk about is just making sure we take care of our people, our staff. Here, I think we've got great people, but making sure we create great careers and that people are fulfilled and obviously focused on our mission, but also having what's a fulfilling career for them.
And what are you personally most excited about in your new position?
I like all of us, the game has become, I got to it late, but it's become a big part of my life. Perhaps, other than my family and my closest friends, really the biggest influence in my life. My son's a good player, and I kind of have spent, in fact, I just got off the plane this morning, as you mentioned. I was caddying for him in LATAM Q School in Buenos Aires yesterday in 98-degree heat, and now I'm sitting at my desk this morning worried about what he's shooting today. But so that's been that part of it, and kind of having him grow up to the junior side of things, and then through college. I met my wife on a driving range while I was caddying. My best relationships in life are somehow related back to golf. And so the opportunity to give back to something that's really become a huge part of my life is an extraordinary gift to me, to get to reinvent myself around something that I'm passionate about. My parents were both teachers. My dad coached me in eight different times in high school in basketball and baseball, and I say that in the sense that while my past's been kind of different and have gone through the business world. When I got out of school, I had 3 jobs, 2 of which were coaching and teaching, and 1 of which was in the business world. And I decided it would kind of ultimately be easier to go back to school, to teaching, that it would from business, and it would be to go from business from teaching, and started in the business world. And 35 years later, I was still there. But I say it in the sense that my roots really aren't a heck of a lot different, probably, than a lot of the folks on the line. My real lessons in life have been around teaching and coaching, and somehow I've gotten a chance to go full circle and come back to it. So I'm really excited about being around the game. What turns me on mostly is trying to make lives better in some form or another, and if we can figure out how to make this career noble again, if you will, and make lives better for 29,000, and then the extension of the millions of people that our members touch and how they make their lives better, then that'll be fulfilling. That's really what I get a kick out of, and I think the leverage of what we can do. We have this is a beautiful game that teaches so much and gives so much back. It's such an engine for good in so many ways, whether it's charitable or life lessons, or how we can help veterans, and all these things are amazing kind of triple dividends to the game. And so I think it's just to get the chance to try to help steer that vehicle towards greater good and higher heights and better lives is something that, again, is just a real gift. So that's really what I'm most excited about.
And then what would you say from your professional past will help you the most in this new position?
Well, John, I think life is about all the experiences you have and hopefully learning from one and making each of them apply to whatever the next thing is. I'm sort of a big believer in liberal arts education in the sense that I think you need to get wide and experience a lot of things before you can figure out how to make a difference in your life and other lives and in the world, if you will. And so I think the best kind of innovations come from horizontal integration, if that makes sense. If you get wide and then kind of connect dots across things as opposed to going deeply vertical, grinding into one thing. I think the real change is if when you take a principle you've learned somewhere else and apply it somewhere else. And so, my father was kind of a Socratic teacher. I think that's crept into my management leadership style, which is always sort of consensus building, trying to be a really good listener, trying to lead people to answers as opposed to impose them on people. I think that, when the teachers out there and the coaches are out there teaching and coaching it, you have to say things a lot of different ways before, a student might actually understand it and have it be absorbed. And so I think the chance to kind of apply a lot of what I've learned in business, but in life, and just around people, I hope all of those things, whether what I learned on the playing field to, what I learned in boardrooms or various negotiations, I think oftentimes, it's sort of a cliche, but you learn more from mistakes and hard times. I think some of my best relationships in business came out of problems. You're always going to have a problem, and how do you kind of solve it? And how do you behave? The fact that you do what you say you're going to do and do the right thing and under promise, over deliver, those kinds of things are kind of how I was raised. And so I think a lot of that is just sort of the principles with which I was raised and applying, all these, experiences, whether that be in business or and various other things I've done. And so I hope that it's, a compilation of everything I've been lucky enough to be around, from, great people, great schools, great games, great institutions, and just watching how people lead, how people learn, how people interact, and again, trying to be a much better listener than I am a talker.
And dipping over to a more general question here, in doing a SWOT analysis of the PGA and the PGA's health, what's the biggest threat to the PGA's long-term success, in your opinion?
I think that's a great question. I think I'm going to give you probably a couple different answers than you think I might. I think we should be in the position of being at the center of all things golf. We have an opportunity because we have, we touch the game from the beginning to the end. Theoretically, your first shot that you ever hit until your last, right? And try to sort of connect along that whole continuum. I think we also, and we have, the biggest army in the game in the form of, our 29,000, right? And so I think, we should have that position at not in terms of controlling things, but in influencing things, of being the place that everything kind of golf flows through, because they want to have our approval. They want to have us, our opinion, that we, take whatever is brought into us, make it better, and pass it on, right? And so, not because we're trying to control things, but more because we touch everything and therefore should have the most informed position. And we have this chance to be, sort of the conscience of golf, the United Nations of golf, if you will. And I think that's where we should be. I think our threat is that we don't assume that we don't execute upon it well enough, that we become that we're overly bureaucratic, not imaginative enough, don't evolve with the game, sort of get stuck in our past or in our history, and don't sort of grow with the game. I think grow with the game, evolve the game, lead the game towards where it needs to be. I think our biggest threat is that we sort of defend our parents' game rather than trying to embrace what will ultimately be our kids' game, and driving in that way. And I think that's the sort of existential threat to the game. We worry about the state of the game all the time, and we wring our hands over it. But there's so many good things going on that, across the game. And the professional side, it's in amazing shape. Obviously, Tiger's return has helped that a lot, but we've got all these young, great players that are playing the game in the right way and behaving in the right way. We've got, a thing like Top Golf where we're talking about rounds being flat, but Top Golf is growing at 20%. I think we all maybe viewed that as an oddity and maybe a threat even, but that's golf. We can create true golfers at 20% of that 20% growth. That would be a wonderful thing. And so something's going on there. We need to pay attention to it. You look at Junior League, where we took it over 5 or 6 years ago, and you had 5,000 or so kids playing, and now we're over 50,000, and 40% or so, or approaching 40%, are girls, and 20 to 25% are of kids of color. There's something going on there, right, that we have to embrace. And there's certainly threats to the game in terms of time it takes, and societal ADD and attention span, access, cost, how welcoming the game can be, how complicated it sometimes seems. And so those are obstacles, but things that we are also opportunities. And so thinking about how we can adapt, not change the rules, obviously, but embrace the game in any form. If someone plays 9 holes, great. If they play 3 holes, great. It's still golf. If you putt on your carpet, it's golf. We shouldn't be defining it by how many, 18 holes are played. And if we get people interested in having fun, and making it, returning it to being a kid's game, which is why, 99% of the people on earth play it, then, that's a good thing. And we can grow it and embrace it. And so I just think our threat is in my view is probably not hanging on to the traditions of the game, the whole reason that we all love it, and the fact that people follow rules and take their hats off at the end of the game, and are gentle men and gentle women. That's beautiful, and then we obviously have to keep that, but we also have to adapt to what is a new world, and embrace golf in some different forms. And so I think that's the art form we have to do. That's the needle we need to thread. And if we can do that, the game will be more relevant, more healthy, 50 years from now than it is today. And I think that's both our greatest opportunity as well as our greatest threat. I think if we don't do that, we could be less relevant and less impactful, 50 years from now than we are. And so we're at that sort of tipping point of that. And again, I talked about it earlier, but impacting lives is what we're all about, right? And making sure that we make the funnel wide enough to impact more is what what we need to all be about.
And what do you think the PGA's biggest area of opportunity is?
I think it's probably the same thing, but I also think I think if we can make the game look a little bit more like the world, then we can make the world look a little bit more like the game, right? And so that's really why we fell in love with it. We fell in love with it for ourselves, but we fell in love with it for what it does for people. How, again, how we can, how through PGA Reach we can touch all sorts of people. How we can, restore lives through PGA Hope. How, we can connect dots. How we can create, an island for people to go to for 3 or 4 hours and forget about their phones, not be worried about being on them, right? And the relationships that are made through the game, the lessons that are all made through the game. And so I think our opportunity, again, I worry about, certain sports like football, which is, at perhaps an existential moment, right, in terms of all the injury issues, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think golf's at that point at all, but I do think, we can do some things to make it more relevant and therefore, impact more lives, or we can probably keep doing the same thing we've been doing, and it'll slowly become less relevant and impact less lives. And that's where I am. And this is not radical change at all. I think it's more evolution, right? And I don't think there's any one idea that's going to magically grow the game. I think it's kind of all the above, thinking about how we can do things slightly differently. You think about it, the game was started, with shepherds and in fields with, staffs and hitting rocks into a hole, right? So it's a kid's game. If you think about games that are growing, pickleball is a great example, right? It is flat to down, and pickleball is booming because it's fun and it's simple and the rules are there and it's sort of portable and it's co-ed and people can play it quickly and you get a bit of exercise and it's a lot of fun. And thinking about ways to apply those principles to our game, I think is how we need to think about it, and I think that's ultimately the opportunity.
Now, specifically, any plans on growing the game? So we just, if you didn't see it, just appointed our first ever chief of innovation, Arjun Cowdrey, who's been with the organization for a number of years. Very smart guy who came from different fields, not from golf, but has fallen in love with the game, and as we all have. Very thoughtful, very piped into lots of different ways of thinking in different companies. And I think he will create a new kind of DNA, if you will, at HQ, and I hope through the membership, of thinking thoughtfully about innovation. And one of the things that was just approved by the board is the idea of creating sort of an innovation incubator where we would try to find interesting companies, ideas from members and from outside the membership that will bring ideas to us that we may invest in, we may lend to, we may just try to seed, right? I think that's could be really interesting kind of fertilizer, if you will, for the game, to try and bring people together around that thoughtfulness. I think as we migrate to Frisco over the next 3 or 4 years, we will hope we're going to try to make that into sort of a laboratory of golf, both in terms of the facilities that we'll have there, the 2 championship courses, the short course, the practice facility, our retail center, our Hall of Fame,
our education center, kind of a university atmosphere, if you will, and trying to attract other companies, other people of the game to come to Frisco and be part of this community of golf. And so I think that's another aspect that will fuel that. We are being approached around the country on 8 to 10 or so different opportunities of municipal golf courses that have, were built sort of in the 20s, as from the Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson, post-industrial revolution period of trying to create parks and outdoor entertainment and baseball fields and golf courses for the people in urban settings, and a lot of those have failed over time through mismanagement, underinvestment, just sort of drifting from the game. And a number of towns are coming to us to see if we can be helpful in restoring those. And the basic model will be to create some local 501(c) charities that would, raise money around restoring the golf courses, endowing them, and fundraising around them, and ability to run. And we think if we can do that, we're sort of bringing the game back to the people. We can create, a number of PGA Reach, perhaps first tee facilities within those, as well as learning centers, perhaps junior leagues for sure. Perhaps other leagues of other cohorts, whether that be women or seniors or veterans or just millennials, or all kinds of different ways to apply that. So those kind of ideas and energies around the game, we think, are these kind of laboratories for golf that we would hope to plant in a number of other places around the country. So those are the sort of the beginnings of the ideas.
Now, you alluded a little bit to the headquarters move to Frisco. With the move of headquarters to the middle of the country, when do you see a main office being established in the westernmost United States?
That's a great question. I think, main office may be an overstatement, but I'm having been in the business of being, serving clients and being near your clients and through various branches and pretty much through my whole career. I'm a believer that you need to get closer to, the sort of, as the famous bank robber once said, why do you rob banks? And he said, well, because that's where the money is, right? So I think you want to be close to the action, close to clients, and in our case, the clients are our members, right? And then our members, pupils. And so we absolutely can foresee having some membership offices in the regions at some point. We've got a lot going on right now. This move to Frisco is sort of once in a lifetime generational kind of move. A lot of moving parts, a lot of work. We're going to keep a fairly substantial presence in Florida because we have a long history here, and have it doesn't make sense to move the whole this whole office, whole company essentially across the country, but rather stay here, which is one of the certainly golf centers of the country. We're opening a small office in New York City to be our commercial office, because we have, in my view, we should have had one. We're a big business now. We should have had someone there, some people there all along, again, to be close to the broadcast partners and a number of our other kind of partners. And so we're going to end up with three, two fairly large and one very large, one fairly large, one small. And could I see a Pacific time zone membership office at some point over the next period of time? Absolutely. Wouldn't promise anything right now, just given we've got so much going on and a little bit of a bandwidth problem, right? We are stretching the organization heavily with all that we've we're trying to accomplish right now.
In your professional life, what do successful organizations have in common?
They always have a great culture. Isn't always the same culture, but it's a culture that everybody buys into. They play as a team, and they focus on excellence. You compete with excellence. I think competing on, price works for a while, but excellence is timeless. And you have a great brand. And that a brand isn't something you buy, it's something you build, and you kind of do everything right, time after time, and you wake up one day and you have a great culture and a great brand, and they're certainly intertwined. And the fourth thing I would say is every great company is going somewhere. They have a dream. Once you kind of begin to play defense and you're kind of protecting a lead, that's when bad things start to happen. I think that's true in sports. It's true in golf. As soon as you say I got to par out, you're trying not to make bogeys. That's the first time. That's when you start making a lot of them. And I think the same thing is true in business, that you've really got to be going somewhere. You've got to convince your people that you are. Everyone's got to share in that dream, be part of that team. Really caring more about the team outcome than their own individually. That they believe in the culture, that you're rewarding, good behavior and punishing bad. I have had a golden rule in where I've ever been, which everyone who's ever worked with me or for me knows, is that I've kind of no jerks allowed, right? And if you can keep that principle up in front and actually punish the ones that don't fit into that rule, people really begin to believe that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. So I would say culture, which includes teamwork, build a brand, compete on excellence, and always be going somewhere.
And how are you going to define success in your role?
It was really your first question, and that is, have I served the members well? Have I made their lives better? Have we? I should never say I on this, but I will be, pressing this for sure. Can we make people's lives better? Can we create, real benefits? Can we ensure that we're attracting the best possible to this great business of ours, and rewarding those that come, and making them feel like they are part of an organization that cares about them, that is delivering value for them, and making them better at their job, and creating some added benefit to them doing their job. And then if I can leave the game better than I found it, or then that will define our success. I think that's sort of what my parents always taught me, right? Is leave the room better than how you found it, and that's certainly what I'm going to try to do here. I'd add one more thing, and that is a little bit of what I talked before. I think we're at a unique time in the industry where we need to unite the various entities in golf. I think too much of the past has been competing among those entities for relevance or turf, and sort of competing rather than cooperating. I think there's plenty of it's a complicated set of entities in this business. But there's plenty for everybody to do. We can, cooperate better. We're all trying to do the same thing. If we can grow the pie and make the game better and healthier, then everybody's going to win. We all want to have the same. We all have basically the same goals of again, growing that game, making it a more inclusive and healthier game in various forms. Obviously, we all have our different verticals, and that's fine, but we overlap. So, Jay Monahan at the tour and I have known each other for 20 odd years and are good friends. We talk all the time about how do we do things better together. How can First Tee better align with PGA Reach so that we can introduce more people to the game and kind of have our charitable dollars have even more effect and impact on people. And so I would add that to the list of trying to make the game, the entities in the game, more coordinated, more cooperative. I think there's plenty of money that is pointed at the game, and the industry is big enough. We just need to figure out how to spend it well and most efficiently and to the best interest of the games. And if we do that, I think our members are going to have better careers, better lives, better earning power, et cetera, et cetera.
Along those same lines, what are your thoughts on the PGA brand and globalization efforts?
I think our brand has kind of never been better. Again, I think Pete and the board and the staff here has done a very good job of elevating it, of putting us in a good position to have a seat at the table, to be respected, to have a voice and in everything. I think that's great. I think our brand should, over time, I think, stand for being, again, the most. I think it's respected. I think it's solid. I think it should ultimately be known as having the most impact in the game, being the most thoughtful, having the most willingness to be progressive about thinking about the game, of being innovative, of being entrepreneurial, of being the place that you kind of have to call if you're going to do anything in golf, because we're going to give you good advice. We're going to be good partners. We're going to help accomplish whatever you're trying to accomplish in the game, assuming it makes sense, obviously, right? Not every idea makes sense. And so I think that sort of forward looking where we are the PGA of tomorrow, not the PGA of yesterday, is where we're trying to head. The Gretzky comment from before, and so that's what we really want to do. I think internationally, we are again very well respected. I met last week at the show in Orlando. Meetings all week, but almost half of them, frankly, were international folks that want to get our opinion, want to have our endorsement, partnership. How can we be helpful to them? How can we share, what we've learned, bits of our education, et cetera, et cetera. And so we absolutely want to be the most respected brand in golf. We want to help the international growth, not by doing hostile takeovers of PGAs around the world. I don't think that's necessary, but being helpful where we can, and partnering where we can, but also being very cognizant of our brand, making sure our brand isn't infringed upon, or that we own our own intellectual property, all those sorts of things. But we absolutely want to be helpful wherever we can and grow the game wherever we can, because that'll be jobs, right? It'll be jobs for our own members and some folks that aren't our members. And I think having our excellence in the world is certainly something we want to spread.
What do you believe are some of the basic steps to ensure that macro discussions involving the game of golf, such as equipment, rules, and player development initiatives, always start and end with the PGA?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say they may not always start with us, but they should end with us. It would be my first reaction to that. Others are going to have opinions, and certainly, for now anyway, the USGA and the R&A are charged with, the rules of the game, and we obviously have a say in that, and a very large say. I think, some of the stuff I talked about before of just relationships with the other bodies is important, very important. I'm lucky enough to have grown up, not grown up, but in the last, 10 to 20 years, have relationships with the folks that are running the other organizations. Jay Monahan was my first tournament director at the event that Deutsche Bank ran in Boston every year, so I've known him since then. Actually got Tim was looking for head of sales, and I told him he ought to hire Jay and that Jay would be his takeout someday, which he didn't necessarily believe at the time, but turned out to be true. And so, I have a very open dialogue there. Martin Slumbers at the R&A I worked with him for 15 years at Deutsche Bank. Fred Ridley and I have known each other since we played in the AT&T in the 90s. So I've known him for a long time at Augusta. Mike Davis and I have known each other for 20 years. I'm just getting to know Keith Pelly at the European Tour. Greg McLaughlin, who's now running the World Golf Foundation, was involved with the Tiger Woods Foundation. That was what ran it, which was the sponsor for the same event in Boston. And so, we have a chance. My point on all that is not my connections, but is that, people know each other and have been around together for a long time. And that, so the dialogue is very open. I will be always espousing the principle of sharing and working together and working to grow the game as a unit rather than, in cross purposes, that we should spend our money efficiently and collectively in a lot of cases. And everyone I've talked to absolutely is buying into that principle. And I think we can be the unifier of that. And if we really are the most thoughtful and balanced kind of voice in the game, that we will become, the sort of, voice of authority on all those issues. It's sort of, you earn that right by behavior and balance and intelligence and that's how you earn that respect and that place. It's not just by saying it, it's so. And so I think we have that invitation to do that. Pete's put us in a great spot to do that. And our relationships are very strong through the industry. And I don't think there's a conversation going on in golf right now that we're not, aware of and have influence over. We will, no one will ever have total control over that, but I think we will always have influence. And I think if we, again, behave well, think well, have balance, that we will ultimately be the first among equal sort of voice in that if we earn it. Because
going back to the move to Frisco, Texas, do you anticipate the PGA show making a move to Texas in the future?
I don't. I think we could do lots of things there. The PGA show is for all of you who've been there is massive, right? The center in Orlando is one of the pyramids, right? It's huge and can handle the size of the major of golf business, right? In a way that very few places can. We don't envision anything convention center of that size in Frisco, so I'm not sure we could handle something of that size. imagine lots of other things happening there, education-wise. We could imagine the summer Las Vegas show perhaps moving there over time, which is more manageable size. I really do think it's going to become, hopefully the center of golf in the U.S. I don't mean from a destination standpoint, but from kind of that laboratory, university sort of aspect of things. So I think there'll be lots of activity, lots of things that go on there, but probably not the show. And I don't mean to say that Orlando's the only place on earth that could hold it, but Frisco isn't envisioned to have that scale at this point.
And can you talk a little bit about the PGA Championships move from August to May, and how that's going to benefit our organization and our brand?
Yeah, I think it's great. If you and I was on the board at the time it was decided, and I was a big supporter of it then, and still am. I think for a number of reasons. One is that it creates a better cadence for the game. There was kind of too big a gap from the majors, I think, between Augusta and the Open. The May date fills that beautifully, and now you've got sort of 4 in a row. I think the season for the PGA Tour ends at a more, a more attractive time, before football and it starts, and you get kind of a little bit of a rest. The FedEx Cup has obviously become, not a major, but a big thing. It creates some space for the Olympics, some space for the Ryder Cup, all sorts of things that I think are good for the game. As far as how it is for us, I think it's also a home run, right? We little known fact perhaps, but and I didn't know this till we started doing our television negotiations, but the PGA Championship has actually had higher ratings than the U.S. Open 5 years in a row, and that's kind of August 15th as opposed to June and Father's Day. And so I think our upside of making this an even bigger event, when everybody's in the height of sort of anticipation about the game in May, as the weather turns kind of everywhere in the country to sort of perfect weather to play golf, it's gonna, it'll be a catalyst for watching it, but also for, in my view, growing the game. I think it's wonderful for our members because it's going to lead right into their sweet spot of teaching and coaching, because people are going to want to get the Joneses to go play, and so for all those reasons I think it's great. People worry about the weather, and certainly in the Northeast, you got to worry about May a little bit, but it also opens up other parts of the country that really you couldn't do it in May. You couldn't do it in August because of the heat. And so while we're cutting off a little bit of the country, we're adding, a lot of the country as well. Bethpage this year will be iconic. It's an amazing place, an amazing story, incredible golf course, but maybe even a better story that it was built in the first place and still exists in this form, country club of the people place. And so that'll be great. I think, we all worry about the weather being perfect, but look, we play an outdoor sport, right? And so they play football in Green Bay in December too. Hopefully we get a good spring, and the course is showing off as it should, and we get decent weather. But if we don't, we'll deal with that. We'll deal with that too. I've been lucky enough to be around Bethpage quite a bit in my life. My son has played a bunch of events there. I've caddied it a bunch of times, played it a number of times, and it is an amazing golf course. Last summer it's never been in better shape. So assuming we don't get destroyed this winter, it'll be an amazing venue, and I think going forward, we've got really exciting venues to do it, and so I think May is absolutely in our best interest.
Now, as we draw to a close of the interview, Seth, thank you so much for your time. We can't imagine how busy you are and how full your schedule must be, and to cut out a little time for the Southern California section in this Catalyst webinar, very, very grateful, and just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the Education Committee for the section that you're able to be on with us this afternoon. For the average PGA professional and all of us on this call, what is your best advice to enhance our earning power?
First of all, let me say thank you to you, John. I'm flattered to be asked, and I've, as you said, I've probably never been busier, but I've never been, happier or having more fun either. And so, how people have welcomed me within the organization, within the game, has been remarkable and gratifying and completely flattering and humbling, and I'm honored, and so thank you. And I hope I get to. I think your section has been very thoughtful. I read your newsletters that go out because they're worth reading, and I've learned a lot by doing so. So thank you guys for all you do and for caring so much about the game and making lives better every day. That talked about it before, but the leverage of this game, is us trying to make your lives better so you can make a whole lot more lives better through the game. And so we appreciate that. I think, I think the advice I'll give is almost the advice that I would give any other profession or folks that I've talked to that work for me in other fields, and that is, keep learning, right? I think, I think there's, and I saw it last week again in Orlando. There is a whole new energy and hope around the game. There is, you could feel it in the halls last week. Chip Brewer from Callaway had a good line. He said to me, he said rounds may be flat, but participation is way up. They feel like people are excited about the game again. Again, the professional game is in good shape, and we're seeing it from the bottoms up in Junior League and a lot of the other things we're seeing, Top Golf again. And so, enjoy this and celebrate kind of the good out there. I know it's scary at times, and I feel like, that you guys are right to question at times whether we're really doing what we're put on earth to do, which is to make your lives better. Are we? It's scary, right? If your earning power seems to be flattened out, and you've got kids that are growing up and going to school, and everything's more expensive. That's a scary feeling, and so I understand that, and I want to do everything I can to make your careers and your ability to make money and create safety nets for you in any form that we can, and we are going to be religious about doing that. But in terms of how you can enhance your earning power, I think it's education, listening to what's going on. A lot of this coaching shift that we've made to realizing that people want to be part of a community rather than just playing an individual sport, I think is very real. I think making whatever it is you're doing an experience rather than purely a lesson or a meal or buying an outfit is what it's what we all need to have to do. The service bar is being raised everywhere. At the end of the day, we're all in consumer-facing, customer-facing businesses, and how do you compete when it doesn't need to be on when you don't want it to be solely on price? I think it's about that experience, about making the customer feel like they got they're more than their money's worth, and that they're that they want to come back. And so figuring out how to do that, whatever role you're playing, whether that's in general managementship and learning, how other whatever F&B situations are being run, or whether it's teaching and coaching, or whether it's golf operations. How do you make sure that your members, your customers, your clients, your partners, if you will, are you're making their day better in some form? And I think that's what we all got to do every day. And if you do that, you'll wake up someday and your business will have grown. And I think that's absolutely right. It's, again, competing on excellence and creating a culture around you, and creating these happy, wonderful learning experiences for your clients.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you very much. One final fun question, 2 parts. Favorite course and best round of golf you ever played?
Favorite, I have a different metric. When people say, what do I think is the best course? I always say, what do you think your happiest course is? And that's why I play the game, is to have fun. I think that's why most people do. Obviously, a lot of you folks are very competitive players, and I try to compete, but so I'm going to give you a 2-part answer if I can. My happiest course, if I had one more round to play the rest of my life, or one more round to play, before it was over, probably be National Golf Links on Long Island. Close second would be Cypress, in your great state. And the course I probably respect most on earth as like the best test every day is probably Shinnecock. I think if you put the best 100 players on earth, any Tuesday, you'd have a great test there. And I'd give one more answer, which is one of the best experiences in golf is right here in South Florida at Seminole.
And the best round of golf you ever played, and where?
Oh, sorry, I forgot that. Yeah, I actually somehow managed to cock in a 68 one day.
Wow.
Which it was one of those ones where I actually had a hole in one that day, which helped a lot, but I didn't know what I shot until it was one of those days you're just having fun and playing. It was actually in a member guest, and we were just kind of competing, and I didn't keep a score until I had to write it down on the card at the end because of the hole in one, and I realized I'd shot a 68. And so that's probably a lesson to keeping pencils out of your hands, for me anyway.
Sounds like that was a phenomenal experience. Well, Seth, thank you very much. That's all the time we have today. Thank you again for being on the Catalyst webinar series. For all the PGA members that are on the call, as usual, we will be sending out a 10-question quiz on the content of today's Q&A, along with the YouTube recording of the interview. Please feel free to take the quiz, refer to the YouTube recording as an open book setting, and return the 10 questions to Sharon Kerfman at skerfman@pgahq.com. A score of 70% or higher will earn 1 MSR credit for attending today's Catalyst. I want to remind everybody that our next Catalyst date is on Thursday, February 14th. We will be having Tom Karpus, PGA Tour Tournament official, on the call that day. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon, and thanks again for being on the Catalyst. Thank you, Seth. Take care.